Okay, this video is for anyone that wants to do a braid design on their decorative coil pot. And so what you want to start with are 3 thinly rolled out coils. These coils are thinner than the average coil that I'm using for my coil pot. Here's about the thickness of the normal coil. It might be hard to tell the difference, but if you compare it to the needle tool handle, it's just a little bit bigger than the thickness of the needle tool handle. And the reason you want to do these a little bit thinner is just because we're going to be, it's almost like combining 3 coils all together, so that they're bound to get a little bit thick throughout the process. So what I do is, you want to make sure your coils are all the same thickness, all the same length, and then what I do to start this is I combine the 3 coils at the beginning, just like this, and kind of squish them together. And that just holds them together. Now this part I'm going to eventually start to take off, so I don't need that. But I always start by kind of squishing that together so that the end doesn't fall apart. And then what you're going to do is you're going to start braiding. And so if you don't know how to braid, it's basically wrap 1. Oops. Start this way. Wrap 1 over the other, and so you're moving from one side going to the middle, then you're going to go from the other side, so the right side, go into the middle. And when you're doing this with clay, you want to make sure that your pieces aren't sticking to each other. So now left side goes over to the middle, open up a little space. Now other side to the middle. And what you really want to focus on is not squishing the coils, or else they're going to start to look really flat. It's going to kind of lose that braid shape, and it's also going to look flat compared to your other coils on your decorative coil pot. And so you'll continue doing this. And it's always a little helpful to kind of spread out your coils as you're doing it. And what you're going to notice is that the length that you get this braid to be might not be as long as you need it to be. That's okay. You can always attach more coil to the end. Move this a little bit. And you guys will see a little bit of a size comparison when I go to put this on my coil pot. If you feel that it is too big, then just go a little bit thinner with your coils. This is a relatively big braid, but I wanted it to be kind of big so that it adds some height to my coil pot. So another thing to be careful of when you're creating the braid is you do not want to stretch out your coils too much. So I kind of use my other hand to assist. And I'm not pulling on the clay, I'm just kind of very delicately laying one piece over the next. And you can see with mine I've got some spaces in between where you can see through. Depending on how you want your final braid to be, you can keep those spaces or create it with those spaces. If you don't want it to have those spaces, just wrap it a little bit tighter. I'm doing it kind of loose right now. And so I'm going to go through a little bit faster. Continuing to go right side over the center. Left side over the center. Or I guess for you guys it would be top over bottom. And again, main thing you don't want to do is you don't want to squish this down, because what that's going to end up doing is making your coils look really flat, and then when you put these flat coils next to these rounded coils, it really just looks kind of weird on your final coil pot. Alright, so I'm getting to the end. Also being sure not to pull my coils too much because I don't want them to stretch and get too thin. This one's getting a little thin. At the end, I'll move it over a little bit more. Oops. Be very careful when moving these. It's getting a little thin at the end. I'm hoping that doesn't affect my design. I just must have been pulling a little bit too hard on that one. Alright, and then once you get to the end, I'm not going to squish this side down because I'm going to blend it with the other side, but let's see if this is long enough to fit across my coil pot. I have a feeling it's not going to be, but we'll see. Alright, so I'm very carefully going to lay this on, and oh my gosh, it is long enough. That is awesome. So what I need to do, let's back this up a little bit. Sorry guys, trying to adjust. So what I need to do is basically figure out where I need to cut this. And depending on your design, my design's actually going to go inward a little bit, so it's not going to sit directly on top of this coil that was on top. It's going to sit in a little bit. I definitely want to cut off this end because that doesn't look very nice. I'm going to leave this end open because I'm actually going to connect the open pieces to each other. So, judging from this end, it looks like, and I'm actually going to cut a little bit of this off just because I don't like how skinny it got, and then also see how they're uneven. This one in the middle ends a lot closer down, so I'm going to cut a little bit of this off. There we go. Now I've got a nice clean edge. And now I'm going to see, okay, where do I need to cut for these to line up for the length that I need them. All right, looks like they need to be cut about here. Should be good. I think I can actually cut a tiny bit more off of this, and you can start to see the design coming together a little bit. You can see where the pieces will line up with each other. So I'm going to cut a little bit more off because I think that's a little too much. It's going out a little far and I want it to actually come in a little bit. There we go. All right, so now I've got the right size and everything. I'm going to take this off and I'm going to start to attach these pieces together so that they look like they're almost seamless. So depending on kind of, oops, lights went out. Let me go get those. So depending on the braid and kind of where everything's going, it looks like this one's going down. So I'll just attach those as I see them. And this is the part where you have to be kind of careful. I'm gonna do some scoring with my toothbrush and water. And then I'm gonna start to put these together very carefully. As best as you can, you want to try to attach these so that they are individually attached to each other and you're not just smushing all of the coils together to each other. So it takes a little bit of time. You might have to introduce some tools to help you with this. But if you just squish them together at the end, it really doesn't look that nice. And even though it's not perfectly following that braided pattern, I could use a brush to clean this up a little bit, a wet brush. And it's not perfect, it's not perfectly following that braided pattern, but at least it still gives the illusion that the coils are twisting. I think it's just the way that mine ended up lining up. And so then you'll go ahead, bring it back to here. Figure out how you're going to place it on here. Make sure it doesn't twist when you're going to place it on. Looking good. All right, then you would do the same as with other designs. Toothbrush and water, or needle tool and water to whatever you are attaching it to. Oops. And then I would do the same on, actually I'm going to leave this the bottom side of this. Just enough to start to get some of that slip to show up. You do not want to press too hard because it will start to ruin your design. There we go. And let's flip this over. Put these on. Looking good. And then you would very carefully blend down some of the coils on the inside just to give it that secure attachment. And you would end up with something that looks similar to this. So that is how you do a braid.